All right. Erin, welcome to Living Off Rentals.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Erin is a fellow West Pointer. What class were you?
2009.
2009. All right. So about 4 years behind me. And she's also a former Army officer. You were in for, was it 16 years? I thought I saw
With West Point and my reserve time, it was 14 years total.
14
It was
years.
like 8 years on active duty.
Wow. Nice. And also, you're a real estate investor, a lender, a mom of four. I didn't realize you had four kids. I knew you had
No,
kids, but
two.
oh,
Two
two.
kids.
Okay, I thought you said
Yeah, don't
four.
give me so much credit.
Yeah, we have our third on the way, and we're talking about
Oh,
potentially four someday, but we'll see how it goes with three first.
good luck.
Yeah, thanks. What's their ages?
3 and 5.
3 and 5. Yep, that's right around where we're at right now. So, um, and Erin's also a real estate investor coach too. So you do a lot of stuff, which I'm really excited to dive into and learn how you balance it all. I'm always surprised how many former military people there are in real estate. I don't know, I feel like I just constantly come across so many, and I don't know if it's real estate that prepares you for, or I'm sorry, the military that prepares you for real estate, or if there's just some of the same, characteristics that people have that are skill sets for both. But it just seems like there's so many that I come across, which is awesome. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's probably the pace of the industry is probably what's appealing to a lot of former military. It's just something new. It's constant. It never stops. And I think a lot of people, whether they realize it or not, they look for that when they get out of the military.
that's a good point. Yeah, I think that probably is what appealed to me.
Yeah.
um, cool. Well, can you share a little bit about where you're from initially and what drove you into the military, and then how that kind of how that grew into real estate?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm from Buffalo, New York originally. I got to do my Go Bills plug because we just clinched a playoff spot. So super exciting. But I haven't been home I've traveled home, but I haven't lived at home since I was 18. Most of my family still lives there. My dad is an iron worker. He owns his own business. And his dad was a business owner as well. And he did mini warehouses, like storage facilities.
Hmm.
And so I kind of was always around this business. A lot of my family are business owners, business builders. And so I saw the power of that income, I guess. I did see there was a very feast or famine concept in our childhood. Like when it was good, it was good. And when it wasn't, we
Yeah.
ate a lot of spaghetti. So that has definitely affected the way that I run my business in a lot of ways. But anyway, so my dad is an iron worker. My brother's always worked with him from a young age. I worked with him here and there, but I did a lot of his office work. I balanced his books. I did payroll, all that kind of stuff, starting at like literally probably age 11 or 12. And so always was around that. My dad is real handy. He built both of our houses. And I've always liked to be around the job site. Construction was really appealing to me. So when I decided to go to West Point because I had this concept of what I thought financial freedom was at the time when I was like 17 years old. That was not having to rely on anybody else. And I was a swimmer and I got recruited to swim at West Point. And when I first started pursuing colleges, even when I was offered a full ride, a full scholarship, there were still things I had to pay for: room and board, books, incidentals, things like that. And I was like, I don't know how I'd have to borrow that money from somewhere, somebody, because I can't get a job. I'm going to be swimming 5 hours a day plus going to school. So that's what really appealed to me about West Point, and the fact that we didn't pay for anything, and we actually got paid a very small stipend while we were there, but enough to cover a meal out here and there when you had the freedom.
Yeah.
So that's what was really appealing to me initially. And then when I went and visited the campus the first time, I was kind of reluctant, right? Like military school, I went to all girls Catholic high school, and I went to Catholic schools my whole life, very like rigid, Until I got out of the Army at like 30, was told what to wear every day. And so I was trying to break free of that. But then I walked, like I set foot on the West Point campus, and I knew that was where I was meant to be. So that kind of solidified it for me. And my idea of financial freedom has changed over the years. Like through West Point, it was sort of that concept of not relying on anybody, being able to provide for myself without, anything else. And then when we started thinking about having kids, it changed a little bit. And then once we had kids, it changed significantly. And so now my idea of financial freedom is quite different than it looked back then.
Nice. Yeah. And so what is your idea of financial freedom now?
$30,000 a month, completely passive.
Wow. Very specific.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and it's, when I first started, I thought I'll work on $1,000 a month just to kind of improve my life. But I honestly was more motivated when to buy my first deal. My biggest motivation was offsetting my husband's income. So my husband's still active duty. I got out, and so our income cut in half. Like we made the exact same amount of money. He's my classmate as well. So to the penny, same amount of money. So I got out of the Army, and our household had half the income overnight. And so I thought, well, I can buy one single family home. It was going to cash flow like $250 a month, which is nothing to write home about. But the tax benefits are what appealed to me. And I said, we'll be able to write this off as a loss by the time we consider our mortgage interest, depreciate the asset, and then write off a couple other things that we're doing or using anyway. And we can offset some of his income. And that's how I can contribute a little bit, still hang out we had a baby at the time. And so that was my biggest motivation in the beginning. And then I was like, okay, well, I can do this. And so 1,000 came pretty quick. And then it was 3,000, then it was 10,000. And now I'm like, realistically, when all is said and done, to be truly financially free and travel like we want to, $30,000 is that number.
Wow. Yeah. It is funny. I talk to a lot of people who have been in real estate for a while, and it's, your goals definitely evolve a lot over time. Can you talk through that progression, what that looked like? So what year was it that you decided to leave the Army?
I got out in 2017.
2017. Wow. Okay. So about 5 years ago. And so you started with your first property at that time. And how did that progress from there? Like what did your investing progression look like?
Yeah. So I bought my very first investment was a single family home. It was a new build in Clarksville, Tennessee, right outside of Fort Campbell. That's where we were at the time. And that's where we are again now. That was like 3-4 assignments ago. But I started looking for distressed properties. I was listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast, and I heard like, look for distressed properties, try to get some equity, buy right. And so I went to all these places, and I was like, okay, I can get maybe 20% or $20,000 in equity out of this property, but it needs a new roof and a new HVAC. And I was like, it's going to cost me $20,000 to do that stuff. And I just like didn't get it. I wasn't looking in the right place for these distressed properties. I was just had a realtor taking me around. And so I was like, I don't understand. And then I kind of got on this idea of, we had recently bought our first home and everything was under warranty. And every time we had a problem, we just called the foreman and he came and fixed it. And I was like, that kind of seems like a good option. So I started looking at new builds, and which were going up like crazy at the time, but they were still really affordable. And I was, running cash flow analysis on the properties. I was like, there's still a lot of money to be made, even when I put 20% down and I have a little bit of a higher interest rate because it's an investment. So that's kind of the path I decided to take. And that first property it cost $220,000 all in with closing costs and everything. We were like somewhere around $60,000, which was basically my entire savings account. And we had a little bit more, but we just had a baby. So we were like 60K is the max we're going to put into it. So I finally get the property under contract. It took like probably 10 weeks or so to close because it was still being built. And so I had 10 weeks to just stress about it and just worry about whether or not we were making the right decision, and have everybody tell me that they have an uncle who lost their shirt in real estate and
Yeah.
There's a chance you're going to lose it all and all this stuff. Right. And I was like, no, I've been wanting to do this for so long. I'm going to do it. One investment's not going to break the bank. It was in a great neighborhood that would just rent really well. My property manager was like, trust me, you have nothing to worry about. And I went to closing. My husband was deployed. The title company didn't like our power of attorney. So I thought that was like a sign that we weren't supposed to buy this. I was like, clearly, God doesn't want us to buy this property. He messed up our power of attorney. I just blamed it all on God at the time. And and my husband too. I was so mad at my husband because I couldn't get a hold of him. And I'm sitting at the title company, like ready to wire this money. And they were like, I can't remember what was wrong with our POA, but they wanted to do it. Which I know now, like when you need to use a power of attorney, just let the title company draft it for you. We had the legal office at Fort Campbell do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was like, I walked away from that closing, or that what should have been a closing, just not knowing what was going to happen. I wasn't sure if the seller like threatened to pull it out from under us, and I couldn't get a hold of my husband. I didn't know what to do. And I was like, maybe this isn't meant to be. And I got a hold of my husband, a couple hours later, got a new power of attorney, and we closed like a week later, and everything was fine. I drove from closing to Lowe's, made a copy of the key, and then I met my tenant at the house. That tenant is still in that property today. That was like 4 years ago.
Wow.
And so I thought for sure I was going to have this like buyer's remorse. Like I was like, I'm about to dump everything that we've worked 8 years to save into this property, and then I'm going to have nothing, and I'm going to feel really worried about it. But I didn't. I felt like I invested the money. And the other benefit was like, because it took a little while to build it, from the time that we put it under contract to the time we closed, I actually got a little bit of equity out of it. So I had a little bit more than just my 20% down payment, because it appraised well, I guess. Well, I can't really say it appreciated, but it appraised well.
Mm-hmm.
So that made me feel really good about it. That tenant was and is phenomenal. Just a really great first experience. And so then I was like, all right, I'm ready to scale, but I have no money. I had no money. I had an IRA, which I didn't know that you could invest. And then my husband deployed again a couple months later. And I decided to sell my car and just drive his truck. So then I had $25,000. And I found a seller finance property that I flipped. So it was $12,000 down, and the monthly payment was like $200 some a month. Super low stress in terms of the monthly sort of burden of those the payment and the utilities and things like that. It was a tiny little house. My dad and I flipped it ourselves, and I turned that $25K into $40K. And then I also discovered that you could self-direct your IRA. So I bought a duplex in Marion, Illinois, which I had never even heard of. It's like 2 hours north of where I live now. I didn't even know where it was on the map at the time. Maybe a year and a half after we bought that, we moved out to California. So we're driving out of Tennessee up through Illinois. And I see on the interstate I-65 a sign from Marion. And I was like, oh, I wonder how close our property is. It was like 2 minutes off the interstate. So we decided to do a drive-by. Never been in that property. Saw it for the first time. But anyway, it's crushing it. I'm actually closing on this week on another 3 unit. Again, I've never seen the property in that market because I have a realtor, I have a great property manager, all that stuff. But so anyway, so then did those 2. Then I had a baby. I thought that I would take a little bit of time off, but I was like hooked and ready to go. And I put in an offer on a 10 unit, which I thought was a reach. I kind of thought, I was like, I'm just a stay-at-home mom who dabbles in real estate. But I had a mentor at the time. His name is Buddy Rushing. He does White Feather Investments. Do you know him?
Yeah. He was on episode, I think it was like 5. And so we're up to like 110 now. And he was on one of the first ones. So he's great guy.
Yes, that was probably around the time, because when he first got started with his course, I forget what he calls his course.
The accelerator.
Yeah, the accelerator. I was the second iteration of that.
Okay.
And I remember him saying like, well, if you bring us deals and you close, we'll make sure you get paid. So I found this really awesome 10 unit property in Clarksville, and I was like, hey buddy, check this out. This is a great deal for you. And he was like, yeah, we're kind of busy. We're not, pursuing things like that right now. Why don't you offer on it? And I was like, me? I was like, I'm not, this is 10 units. This is a commercial property. I wouldn't have the first clue what to do here. And he was like, well, do all the things that I've taught you and let me help you. And I did, and I got the property, and I represented myself as a realtor. The seller was also the realtor, so was able to go direct with the seller, which made such a cool experience, like seeing that whole thing through. Got a commercial loan, bought a 10-unit property. And that the reason we were able to buy that is because we sold the house we were living in at the time as we were moving out to California. So we wanted to keep it as a rental, but they were building a battery plant, and there was like this plume analysis on the lead that was going to be emitted. And ours was like the worst part. And they were like, don't worry, it's a safe level of lead. And I was like, I don't know that there is a safe level of lead.
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable putting a family in this house. Like, let's sell this house. And it worked out because when I was still in the Army, we were like double paying principal and things like that. So we cashed out like 130,000 when we sold it, and we put all that into the 10 unit. And then at that point I was making a decent amount of cash flow, and everything was property managed. I moved to California. I was no longer being a realtor because my license was in Tennessee. And so I suddenly had all this time on my hands. So I decided to become a coach, and I created this course on Teachable just to kind of make like investing a little more approachable. So I started actually having some income at that point, and then I was able to scale much more significantly. Got into flipping, did flipping for like a year, and then got into wholesaling with actually a couple of my classmates. Did that for like, I don't know, maybe 7 months, and then realized after both of those that I needed to stay focused and focus on building my own financial freedom and building my own business. And so now I'm back to buying as much as I can.
Got it. Wow, man, that's quite the progression. Were you flipping in California?
I was flipping while I lived in California, but I was flipping here in Nashville.
Oh,
so
okay.
I was doing it completely remotely.
Wow.
And the last flip that I did remotely went not great. The contractors got like completely overwhelmed, and they started cutting corners. And then when I listed it, COVID hit, and that was really stressful. So I took the first offer. Someone came to me and they loved the house. They had like a fairly low offer, and I sold it to them. If I had kept it, if I had held on to it for just a couple more months, I think I would have made a lot of money and had like multiple offer situation. But after COVID hit, nobody set foot in that house for 10 days. And on day 11, somebody made an offer, and I was like, sold. You can have whatever you want. Get this property off my books. It was a $700,000 historic like Tudor home in one of the most affluent neighborhoods of Nashville. And it was very, very, very stressful. So kind of got me out of the flipping game. I did one more after that, but now I'll do a renovation, but only to BRRRR the property and keep it in my portfolio.
Got it. Okay. So after that, then what did your focus go to? It's just purely rentals then?
Yeah. So for a long time, I was doing the flips, and then I kind of shifted to the BRRRR strategy, where I would, find something undervalued that needed work, put in the work, add the value, and then refinance it. And now I'm pretty much exclusively focusing on turnkeys. I'm a little bit burnt out from managing contractors, mostly because of just the time restraint. Like, it's like every time you go sit down to dinner, your contractor has an emergency, or, on a Sunday, whatever. So you have no control over your schedule, which is not what I was looking for when I got into this. It's not the life I want to lead with my 2 girls. So I now just essentially focus on turnkey rentals. I do C-class multifamilies. And then last year we started focusing on, we bought 2 Airbnbs, one right near Destin, Florida, and one in the Smoky Mountains. And I didn't think we'd get into that for a while, but last Christmas, right before Christmas, we moved out of California over to Kansas, and we left California like December 7th, and our apartment in Kansas wasn't ready until the 31st. So we were literally homeless for Christmas, and we just bounced from our family's house and things like that. And I just was kind of sad for my kids. They didn't have, they didn't wake up in their own house at Christmas, and Christmas just wasn't the same. And so I was like, we need to find a place that we can always go to, no matter what the military does with us, no matter where they send us, that our kids can make memories. So we bought a beach condo in Miramar Beach, Florida, and then a cabin in the woods in Townsend, Tennessee, which is right next to like Sevierville, Gatlinburg area.
Got it. Okay. And have those performed really well over the last year?
No, I wouldn't say, well, the beach condo, we essentially broke even.
Okay.
The HOA fees are insane. They're like
Mm,
$2,200. They're 3,000 a month, 3,000 a quarter. There's two HOAs. I didn't know
okay.
this before closing. So if you guys are going to buy a condo, like in a development, my husband was so mad at our realtor, which part of it was her fault, but I was probably even more responsible. I just asked about the HOA and we got the information on one of them, which
Oh,
covers the building, our 4 units, and the exterior structure of that building and the insurance and all that. There's a whole nother significantly larger HOA fee for the entire complex because there's dozens of pools and things like that. So anyway, we broke even, but we traveled there 3 times. We spent 3 weeks there, and we sent our parents there for a week. So I'm totally fine with that. It has appreciated significantly. We paid 360 for it at the beginning of last year. It's probably worth like 425 now.
mm,
So totally fine with that. The one in Townsend, Tennessee, we just got up and running as an Airbnb in October, and we're probably after this month we might be like $3,500 in the hole, and we just kind of doing it on our own. We hired Evolve to do the marketing. And so we are expecting a significant increase in the number of rentals. But I think our goal is just to break even by month 6, which I think we will. October is the biggest month. We didn't get it ready till the end of October. So November, December were decent and higher rates. January, we've had like 1 booking so far. So I think it'll pick up again. It's an interesting market though.
yeah. Yeah. Mine are all, it's November and January are the 2 slowest months for the last several years. I don't know why. That's how I think people just kind of stop traveling before Thanksgiving. It's always booked up for Thanksgiving, but it's slow. And then January, obviously after the holidays, I think people are less likely to travel. But yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the Miramar Beach, like you broke even, but like you said, you get free vacations, and at the same time, you just accumulated $65,000 of net worth to get
Yep.
free vacations. So, not a
Yeah.
bad situation there.
Yeah. So probably no like cash on cash return, but like if you look at an internal return, it's pretty significant. Plus,
Yeah,
I don't. This is the first year we've had short-term rentals, so I'm curious to see kind of how our taxes play out. I'm really comfortable with how it works on a long-term rental, and we're always able to show our rentals at a loss, even though they cash flow.
mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to see how if a short-term rental is done the same way. I have an accountant that does it, and he just explains it all to me. He does it by property. I'm assuming everybody does, but I'm just curious to see. Obviously, you know how that works, but I'm
Yeah,
expecting some sort of a incentive tax break, but I just don't really know what it looks like.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I think you'll be happy with it. There are slightly different rules, especially when it comes to like the real estate professional status, which as a short-term rental host or owner, you don't have to have that status to write off your regular income. You probably already have that status anyway, so it doesn't really matter to you. But for some people who are just like a doctor and they buy a expensive vacation rental, they can write off all their income or their losses on the vacation rental against their income as a doctor. So there's different pros and cons to it, but I think overall you'll probably still get some losses you can write off. So you're targeting then the multifamilies, like C-class type multifamilies. How do you? I mean, I think it was great the point you made about your lifestyle, that you decided to get away from flipping because of the lifestyle you wanted. That's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to people when they're starting out is like figure out what you want your life to look like and how the real estate can complement that, because that's why you do it. I took the opposite approach the first 5 years. I was flipping heavily, and it was like, I'll do whatever it takes to make the business work. And that's like the opposite of the whole reason you get into it. So how do you do the small multifamily properties now like I had an 11 unit before also. And it it was kind of a pain for me because the property management wasn't the greatest. But how do you set it up to where that doesn't, take over your life, and who does what in that part of your business?
Yeah. Yeah. So it it wasn't always like this, but I spend almost no time managing my long-term portfolio. I would say I kind of estimate like 45 minutes a week. Every Thursday afternoon, I do some accounting and I just reach out to property managers and occasionally respond to an email like, so and so wants to renew their lease. Will you let them renew their lease? And I just respond back like, are they a good tenant? Did they pay? And if they say yes, I say, yep, renew it. I said, make sure you either like increase the rent to market if it's not to market, or some, some at least progression towards that within reason. I'm a big fan of like keeping good tenants. Like I would rather keep a good one and raise rent $20 than $200 and risk losing them. So try to take care of the tenants that way. So every once in a while I respond to emails like that. The occasional issue my property manager will bring to me, but it's few and far between, honestly. And then at the middle of the month when I get paid, I just go through all the statements, make sure everything's coming in. And then I use Stessa for my accounting. And so I just make sure everything matches up, and that's pretty much it. And I have the only properties I've ever sold, that one I told you about, my personal house that we weren't comfortable based on the lead. The only other properties I've ever sold were properties that we could not get a competent property manager. And I expect a property manager to do everything and to not like, they need to be so much more qualified than me. Like it's not like I'm passing the buck, but I'm like, I'm hiring you to do the things that I either don't want to do or I'm not qualified to do. Like I've gotten my own tenants before and they were crap. And I'll have a tenant come to me and say like, oh, some water leaked in the back door and I got my kids' clothes wet and he needs new clothes. And I'm like, oh, here's an Amazon gift card. Like I'm just a sucker. And so I have no business doing that. And so the reason I focused on the two markets that I have, which are Marion, Illinois, and Clarksville, Tennessee, are 100% because of my property managers, because they do a good job. They keep me out of it. And honestly, the most thing I ever hear from them is once a month, the statement that hits my account. And they're available to me when I have questions or issues. When I'm in Clarksville, I will actually go see the properties that I'm putting offers on. I always take my property manager with me, occasionally take my contractor. So I look for stuff that are hands off. Like I'm not going to pay a property manager and then manage the property myself. Like I have no desire to do a drive-by and make sure that something is done well. Like I know some people try to keep it local, even if they want to hire a property manager. But I'm like, I say to those people, I'm like, well, why are you going to hire a property manager if you're going to go do what it is that they're doing?
Yeah.
And, or that you're paying them to do. And it's interesting because I'm actually reading this book right now. I have it sitting right here. It's called Who Not How. And this was given to me by Sunny Alexander. She's a realtor in Tampa. She's a West Point grad as well. But it's super compelling because it's all about how, like, when you ask how, you're creating a problem or a roadblock, an obstacle. When you say who, you're opening up a whole nother opportunity. And so it's all about putting the right people in place to accomplish your goals. And so when I was flipping, I couldn't continue to buy property because I was too busy flipping. I was too busy managing my own contractors, paying the bills and doing everything by myself. Even if I was remote, like I still had to do all that accounting. I still had to manage things. I had to manage my property manager who's managing, or I'm sorry, I hired project manager when I was in California. So I'd have to make sure they were doing their job, sometimes step in to make sure they were doing the right thing with the contractor. And then when I was doing wholesaling, we worked like 18-hour days every single day. And so I didn't have time. And during all that time, I didn't add any doors to my own portfolio. It's only when I like have my marketing team in place to do to promote my course and work on my sales funnels. And when I have all my property managers doing what they're doing, that I even have the capacity to go out and look for more deals. And I'm like obsessed with real estate. Like if you see me sitting on the couch ever, which is pretty rare, I have 2 little kids and run a couple businesses, I am without a doubt on Zillow looking at properties. That's just what I love to do. So, but I obviously need the capacity to do that. But you also need the income to do that as well. Cause I've kind of learned, I've gotten into some partnerships, some I've worked alongside people and I've also bought properties with people, but now I'm kind of learning I just want to go it on my own. And it's because of that lifestyle that I'm looking for. I'm a person who wants to like make sure people know that I'm bringing what I should to the table and I'm performing and I'm doing what I think they want me to do. But I've learned I don't want that kind of pressure. I just want to do it for myself and in a lot of ways by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I think most people get into real estate initially. I've had partnerships in the past too, very, very similarly, where, you feel like you almost have a job and an obligation to check certain boxes. And, I'd rather have the flexibility. So, you mentioned that you're targeting the turnkey properties now. Obviously, the market's been insane this past year, and turnkey typically is harder to find than other properties. So, what's your process for finding new deals?
Well, this is how I teach my investors as well. As an investor, I think that the more avenues you can look for deals, the better. So I tell people work with realtors who understand investments and don't limit yourself to one. And to, be fair, I'm a realtor too. If you're going to work with a realtor, but you're going to work with other realtors too, obviously don't sign any sort of a commitment, like an agreement that you're going to exclusively work with them. And then also just make them aware, like if you bring me a property and I decide to buy it, you'll get paid. But I am working with other people. I have wholesalers bringing me deals. I have other realtors bringing me deals. And I got one under contract 2 weeks ago, and then suddenly two other realtors were like messaging me like, what about this one? What about this one? Because they saw that I bought that one because I posted it all over social media. And it's kind of funny to see like that frenzy, like the sharks are swarming. And that's kind of how I want it to be, right? And I spend a lot of time, and I have my assistant spend a lot of time like networking on social media and just like fishing all these Facebook groups, like off-market real estate, wholesale deals, like, and we just go in there and we scoop up all the wholesalers and we figure out what they're doing, what market they're focusing on, and get on their email list. And so I have tons and tons and tons of deals coming to me all the time. And so obviously there's way more than I could ever act on. So I actually help. Part of what I do with my clients is help them take down deals, and I bring deals to them every single day. The ones that are just show up to my inbox. Me and my assistant do spend a lot of I guess everything I do is essentially networking, but I do have her spend 20 minutes a day actively networking, getting on buyers lists for the markets that my buyers are interested in. My last two, which I think these two are really compelling for a lot of people who right now are saying, "Oh, it's not right. It's not a good time to buy. The competition is too high. I'm just going to wait." And I tell people, don't wait. And the last two that I bought a triplex in Clarksville, Tennessee, completely turnkey. And I bought it for $272. It appraised for $280. It was on the market for like 5 days when I bought it. And I was the only person to make an offer on it. And it makes me, I want to say like $900 a month in cash flow. And it's like almost a 20% return on investment. It's a C-class property. The one I'm purchasing on this week, I'm not sure, I haven't gotten the clear to close yet from the lender, but it's $100,000. So that one was, $272, appraised for $280. This one's $100,000 for a triplex in Marion, Illinois. He had it listed for $99,000. I offered $100K and asked him to pay $3,500 toward my closing costs, which is the max that my lender would allow. So the seller's paying for all of my points on that loan and most of my closing costs. It's such a small loan. That just appraised for $125,000.
Wow.
Then it will cash flow. The return on this is almost 40%. The monthly payment is $931, and each of the three units rents for at least $800. And so, pretty unreal return. I mean, the market isn't like crazy appreciating, and it's a solid C-class property. I'm sure I'll have a lot of turnover, probably some trouble tenants, but I give those two examples because that one was on the market for like 40 days. And so I went into both of those with no competition, with a motivated seller. And I think everybody won in the end. And now they're both cash flowing.
That's awesome. Yeah. And most of mine have been on market deals recently too. And I very similar approach. I tell people, go to the listing agent directly, because they're the ones who have the properties in those markets. They're talking to sellers regularly, and even if it doesn't work for that particular property, then you have, like you said, a headhunter out there, like this team of people who are bringing you more deals then. And if they're in conversations with sellers, representing them as the listing agent, they're probably going to have that same relationship with other sellers too, and it's funny how many times they will send me a deal and say, hey, I found this deal with a seller came to me to sell this and it's a train wreck. I don't want to list it on the MLS. Do you want to just put in an offer? And so it's a great way to build up a team of people bringing you deals. That's awesome. So in terms of your coaching business, what would you say is the biggest obstacle that you see your clients coming to you with when you first start working with them?
Fear and doubt, without a doubt.
Really?
They want to get into it, and then they create all these reasons. I'm using quotation marks if you're listening. But they are all just excuses, right? They've convinced themselves that they're reasons. But I mean, I've got people in my course who are like 21 years old, in college, have no money, and they're adding deals to their portfolio. They don't have a ton of time either. They're adding properties to their portfolio. They're taking down flips. And these people will like go get them under contract with like under like, a hope and a prayer. No, they don't have investors at the time. They don't have the funding. They don't have any of it. And then they just figure it out. And I don't quite have, that kind of, go to that they do, but it's amazing to see it. And so when I have these other people that come to me and they just have all these excuses, I'm to the point now where I'm a pretty direct person. I'll just tell them, I'm like, those are excuses. And the only person that's standing in your way is you. So if you want to continue to sideline yourself, other people are going to buy your deals. And guess what? It's just going to keep going up in value. So it's going to be even harder to purchase it in the future. And so I can almost tell when I talk to somebody within the first couple of minutes, whether they're going to buy real estate or take action, or they're just not. And so when I do this, I have a course, and then I have one-on-one coaching, which I essentially cap at 2 months for those people that don't really ever do anything, and they'll just come to me with the same issue over and over again. So I cut them off at 2 months. But most people that are actively out there taking down deals, getting things done, some of them will get loans with me. Other times I'll refer them to realtors. So I'm getting paid as they do more, and then they're bringing deals back to the rest of our network, the rest of the people in the course. They're like in some ways syndicating deals, in other ways just pulling in partners. And I've definitely generated this like abundant mindset as a result of this course, because I'm like, the better I do, the more I encourage my clients. The better my clients do, the more they encourage everyone else. And it's like, holy cow, everyone's out there buying real estate, taking down deals. And it's not only super empowering, but it's just really cool to see people literally change their lives in a couple of years.
Yeah. Is there a story that you could share, or an example of somebody that, an outcome that you've seen occur as a result?
So there's one girl that I work with all the time. Her name is Brenna, and she came to me a couple years ago. She had heard my Bigger Pockets podcast, and on that I talked about I was laying a vinyl floor, and I was like 9 months pregnant, and I was trying to get it done. And she at the time was painting this entire house, and she was super stressed out. She did this flip on her own. She was like, I got to connect with her. And Brenna is a cancer survivor, and she's just the coolest person ever. And she is one of those people that will go, and she lives in Boston, but she buys properties in North Carolina, like completely sight unseen. Like before she even runs the numbers, she'll like throw an offer out there. And for the most part, it's worked out really well. She has found herself in trouble one time. And I'm getting on her about due diligence, making sure that she kind of takes a step back and like really thinks it through. But what she's been able to do in real estate has helped her in so many ways. She's also a realtor, and she does some type of direct sales, like hair products and skincare. I forget what it is, but like the confidence that she's generated through real estate, and like from going from nothing to, she owns like 10 or 12 doors now, has changed everything for her, like as a realtor, confidence, all that stuff. And so it's really cool to see not only her finances change, but her entire life change too. And there's a couple people like that have, it's like, there's kind of two ends. There's like the people that have no money and they just go and make something of nothing. And then there's people that have a lot of money, like sitting in a savings account, and they've never like been compelled to make it grow. And then they realize what they're missing out on, and they can scale so quickly or put that money to work so quickly, I guess. And then they're just like, they realize, they start turning their, like spinning their wheels, and they're like, okay, now I can refinance this, and now I'm making this. And to see that scaling is what I think is so amazing. And to see the perspective, like I tell people all the time when they first get started, they're like, they think $10,000 renovation is a lot of money. And then 2 years later, they're like, oh, $100,000 renovation, no big deal,
Yeah. I've seen so many examples of that where it's totally changed, so real estate has just totally changed someone's life. And I think that's awesome. I could tell you have a passion for real estate and for coaching other people and helping them. If somebody's interested in finding out more about the course or working with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. So they can email me, Erin, ERIN, at bcglobalinvestments.com. And my website is bcglobalinvestments.com. I do free training. I have like a webinar that's recorded. You can access it all time. And then I do like at least a quarterly, if not every other month, a cash flow analysis training. People love the cash flow analysis. We just hop on Zoom and I send in my analysis document and we just run through it a couple times. And then I host women's investor conferences quarterly, and each one has a different theme, and we bring in different people that accommodate that theme. Like this one is building a team. So it's in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is right outside of the Smoky Mountain area. That's huge right now for short-term rentals. And so we're going to bring in a bunch of people. There's going to be somewhat of a focus on short-term rentals, but it's just going to be a bunch of different team members essentially coming in and saying, this is what I can offer to you. This is how you can find people like me. These are the questions you need to ask. And just them sharing how they can bring value. But anyway, and then the last thing I do is monthly just investor meetups. There's one this Thursday here locally in the Nashville area that we call it Pine Sim Properties. And I just try to bring people together as much as I can.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think it was Carly DaCosta mentioned the women's group that you do. And she said it was amazing. So that was at the White Feather Summit that they had. So
yeah. So that was right before our last one. And she actually came with her baby, and she was like in front of this group of like 60 women with a baby, and people were like, man, we need to normalize this. And so that's what we're trying to do. There's childcare at our
wow.
At the next conference. We didn't have childcare before, but there's childcare at this one. And we just want to make sure that there is no barrier to entry, because in a lot of ways it's harder for women. I just one like quick tidbit. I've never ever in my entire like 2+ years of coaching had a man come to me and say, I can't get my wife on board. I'm not sure I can pursue this. But I have had so many women say, my husband's not on board. I'm not confident taking that first step. And so that's just one of the, differences between men and women. And so we're trying to just get a bunch of women in the same room. We all have similar fears. I mean, everybody does. But I think when you bring women together, working through those fears and kind of putting our heads together, empowering each other is one of the coolest things I've ever done. And so we're going to keep hosting these conferences every quarter.
Awesome. Speaking of childcare, I need some around here. My son just got back from swim lessons and he's running around screaming. So you'll probably hear some of that in the background, but I should probably wrap this up. Well, thank you very much for all the sharing here. This has been super informative. I know the community is really going to get a lot out of this. So I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to, in the future, having you back on and seeing how your goals are continuing to evolve.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Take care.